Good evening. Welcome to the July 23rd Derry School Board Workshop. If we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so tonight is a school board workshop. We would be discussing our plans for capital improvements as we move into the budget season and obviously to March election. So I will, we'll get right into it. So Joe, Austin, do you guys want to tee us up, or do we have somebody to do that?
Okay, welcome everybody. We have documents that we're going to be putting up on the screen. Everybody has them in front of them. And you want us to go through the priorities first, is that?
I mean, don't read it back and forth. Let's just give a high level kind of what you guys did and what was presented to the facilities committee, then the school board, and then I guess we'll throw it out to the school board to start the discussion, more detailed discussion from there. So
shout out to Jeremy Lamoth, who's here with us tonight, Director of Facilities, and his second in command, Rob Spirito. They've gone through these documents numerous times, and what the school board was looking for was the first document, which says Facilities Priorities, version 1.2, was to list off the major priorities, sort of the must-haves. And then the second document, which says secondary considerations, are the other tasks that need to be considered after, and these priorities have been removed from that. So there's not duplications on the two lists. So we have our priorities, and then we have our secondary considerations. And if you look at the facilities priorities, it goes through by school, and then there's a very handy section that says for reference, that talks about specific things and gives some explanations of things like the difference between casework and millwork, and what we're doing with roofing, and gives some pricing for what we have, and talks about a number of things, rough order of magnitude. There's a good explanation in there. And with the secondary considerations sheet, again, talks a little bit about what's been done and what we could be looking to do as we move forward. And then, again, listings by schools. And Jeremy is here for specifics. There's some things that we'll be able to answer, but he has the best knowledge because he's been living it, him and Rob, and putting this together. So as questions come up and thoughts, we can discuss those things.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think the goal tonight, as I see it, and obviously if people see it differently, is as a group to come to a consensus of what we deem is the absolute needs to move forward with, that we want to put forth on a warrant article. And then obviously there's a list, the priority list that was provided by Jeremy and his team. If we want to discuss any additions, subtractions, whatever we want to discuss as it relates to that list. And then I think at the end of the meeting, hopefully we've come to a consensus of all 7 of us that agrees on how we proceed. And then what will need to be done from there is Jeremy and his team will have to go back to Jobin or whoever we deem as the proper vendor to go back and update the estimated costs of these projects. Because as we know, these project costs are a little older based on last year. So, tonight will be outlining the direction we're going, and then we'll have to have another workshop to kind of finalize the exact numbers that we get from estimate-wise to push forward on a bond and go forward. So I think, I think that's kind of how I see it as the priorities tonight. And I think, as we discussed before, I think it's important that all 7 of us come to a consensus and unified group of what we feel deem is necessary and needed, prioritized and needed. So with that being said, I'll open up the floor to any board member that wants to kick us off.
And I'll jump in one more time. I apologize. There's also a third document from Gale Associates. It says Gale up in the upper left-hand corner, Gale, and that is specific to when you look at our priorities and you look at the first thing listed for West Runningbrook, replace concrete banding around the exterior of the building, and this is specific to that as well.
I just want to say thank you, Jeremy. Where is he? Oh, there he is. And whoever else helped put these Rob and these documents together, because this is what I was looking for. What's been done and what do we need, the stages. And I really appreciate it because I know it's a lot of work on top of everything else you're doing. So thank you. It's very helpful.
And I just wanted to go over the reason we put the Gale report in. The draft was presented at the Facilities Committee, and they needed to finalize and review it. And so that's why today we got the final version. So I wanted to make sure I presented it. I know that the recommendation is that we do the netting since we don't have the money for the facade. In order to do that, to use any carryover funds from last year, I would need to have a public hearing and post it 7 days beforehand, so we could either do that for the August 6th or the August 27th meeting.
I'll go. To echo Brenda, thank you, Jeremy, Rob, and all the administration. I know how much work has gone into all this over the last several years. Looking at the plan, I'm kind of looking at the secondary considerations when I really start to think about the priorities. The 2 buckets in the near future and then looking ahead. My question, and obviously it's going to be different depending upon the building, but roughly when we're looking at in the near future, what's the span, right? Are we talking 1 to 3, 1 to 2?
When we originally made this list, we renamed it secondary considerations, but pretty much the priorities were the 1 to 3, which was a year and a half ago-ish. So those now have become more important priorities. Then in the near future was like a 5-year, in a 5-year span. And then the looking ahead, we had between 5 to 10-year span.
Thank you.
Yep.
So when I think about kind of where we're at, I know we had a lot of feedback with regards to how we had it set up last year with regards to the dollar amount and then the 3 tranches. Looking at all this, I'm still of the opinion that broken down tranche system probably makes the most sense from a project management standpoint. We're talking, fairly big number wherever the board lands on in order to execute said projects in, say, 3 years, if it's 1 tranche, is a pretty heavy lift. My opinion is it still makes sense, whether it's 2 or 3, to go back and run it back the way we had it set up last year. I'm also of the opinion that I think we need to really look at in the near future items, 3 to 5 years, because the reality is if we go for 1 warrant article, 1 bond, we've got 3 years to complete. That really just puts us right up against potential in the near future items. My mindset is we really need to start thinking about short-term, medium-term, long-term. We've got to start to shore up some of these things so we're not in a constant state of flux and of chasing things. I think we obviously, priorities need to be addressed, but we really need to consider what the in the near future items look like. I added up, for personally, what you had on the report, just under 3 million for in the near future for all of the buildings. To me, it would make sense to add those projects in as part of this, and maybe break it down into 2 tranches, because I want to be very careful, right? When we go to the voters, we're asking for a lot. I don't want to, if we really cut it close to the bone, as we obviously have been for quite some time with regards to making capital improvements, the potential for us to have to go right back to the well and ask for more. I would hope that we can get to a point where we're almost caught up, right? We're too bright, obviously not renovations, major improvements, but we're almost too bright, and then we can kind of start to allocate some funds through the budget process each year to maintain it and do some of these big ticket items. My thought would be to include the in the near future and then maybe tighten up some of these soft cost construction costs. I know your rough order of magnitude kind of broke that down a bit. I think maybe we might be a little fat there, and I know that came up quite a bit in our presentations, in some of the workshops, as well as at the deliberative. So it might make sense to run that a little bit tighter and potentially reallocate some of those soft and contingency costs, either towards other projects or towards some of the in the near future items. Because looking at that stuff, I mean, some of it's roofing, and once these things go sideways, it's tough to patch, and then we're throwing money at it, as we're seeing with the netting, right? So how do we maybe, I don't want to say plan a little bit better, because that's taking away the work that you guys have done, but how do we maybe give ourselves a little bit of insurance and hedge our bets, and maybe address some things before they become issues, so it's not a fire drill? So my 2 cents, probably worth a penny, but.
I just want to jump in on that and ask Jane and Jeremy. My understanding is if the school board makes some decisions on what it is that you're thinking, like if you went with what you said, then it would be to get deeper into the planning of some of these projects, and then the contingencies and those kind of things, my understanding would be a little bit less arbitrary. Is that correct?
But some of these prices probably have gone up 3 to 5%. And to drill down those numbers, there would be some engineering costs, to get rid of some of that contingency money or the soft cost money.
Understood.
Jeremy, when you say the costs have gone up 3 to 5%, is that 3 to 5% from last year, or are we looking at 3 to 5% from 2 years ago? And should it be really 3% 2 years ago,
6 to
then
10.
another 3%?
When we
which-
talked to Jobin, and we were going over the rough order of magnitude just to have a good description for you guys. Like he said, renovation projects carry a higher contingency. A roofing really wouldn't be a renovation. That would be a hard cost. As the numbers age, they will increase year by year by an estimated 4 to 5%.
So we're looking
He
realistically more
said
at,
during COVID, it was 15% that they were seeing for increases year over year. So it's gone down, but it's economy driven, so.
so we could probably say it's closer to 7 to 9, maybe 10%
Yeah,
from,
we'd be guessing,
okay,
but
but in that ballpark somewhere.
it does go up.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I would imagine too, we'll also have to think about, if we're doing things over 5 years, these projects that are on the back end, you have to take that and account for all of those years that are going to pass, while the
Right.
bond is being, dispersed.
Which is, and I know that the contingencies, and people have questioned why that seems high. That's
Yeah.
part of the reason why we need to keep that in there in that
Yeah,
bond.
you're paying for years worth of escalating costs even within the
Yes.
projects themselves.
Yep.
One thing to remember, and I think, David, you might have said it a dozen or more times, that any of the unspent contingencies, soft costs, management costs are unspent dollars from any warrant do go right back to pay the bond. So it's important to keep in mind. I know it was communicated out quite a bit last year, but the money doesn't just go away if it's unused or it doesn't go back into general fund. It would go back towards principal on the bond. So something to just kind of circle the wagons on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, you know, we get income on this money as well, as it sits with the trustees of the town. The trustees, we'll call them. So, you know, there's a lot of different areas that you got to kind of factor in when you do it. But yeah, there's a lot of different upside there, and there's some downside from increased costs as well.
I mean, two things that I see here. I mean, a lot of the secondary considerations are things that I think that we're going to want to do in tandem with a lot of these other projects. You know, I think, you know, when you look at the, you know, the main priority list, this is mostly like back of house kind of stuff. It's mechanical things. It's things where you could put $20 million into these buildings tomorrow, and you just as a person walking in the door, you wouldn't even notice 90% of the things, because there are units that are on the roof and there are things that are in the basement. And, you know, the things that, you know, you really see, and I mean, obviously this all impacts students, but the things that, you know, impact the classrooms, you know, the things that students are using every day, you know, I mean, that's your casework, your things like that, you know, the electrical systems are secondary concerns. And I mean, that's a problem at a lot of these schools that are 50, 60 years old, and their electrical systems go back to a time when, you know, a slide projector was the most advanced technology in the classroom. So, I mean, to me, those things are very important. And, you know, the other consideration here is that, you know, I look at these priority projects and the secondary projects, you know, looking at South Range, I mean, we know the problems that this building has. You look at the, you know, the total, you know, without going into the contingency costs, the total 16 million, 9.3 million of that is just at that one school. It's the smallest school in the district. You know, if you work that out to a per square foot cost, these projects at South Range are $171 per square foot. You know, by comparison, the $1.3 million of projects at Grinnell is $20 per square foot. You know, I mean, I think that we need to put some serious consideration into what putting $10 million into South Range is going to get us. How many more years it's going to get that building, you know, serving the district, and how much more money is going to have to go into that building on the secondary side of things.
So just to add to what Jason said with regards to in the near future, I have a couple items that I would like to see done looking ahead as well, which would be East Derry. I'd like to look at the roof be put on the back end of any bond, and also the sprinkler and fire suppression system. I would think that's something we need to prioritize at East Derry as well. I think everything else I had was within the looking ahead in the near future for my increases, above and beyond what we have in the, you know, the priorities. The one consideration is all the electrical, I forget, is all the electrical in the near future? No, it's not, right? So that's another consideration we got to think about, is the electrical as well, and not all of them are in the near future. But I think at East Derry, those are the two big ones. It's $1 million for roof and sprinkle and fire. That I think tacking that on at the end of the project list is probably something we should consider as well.
I think when we look at these lists too, we have to, you know, whatever we come up with for a project list for a bond, we need to think about the rest of the projects that aren't going to be covered, and we need to have a long-term plan for when we're completing those projects and how they're going to be funded. I mean, I think that's a number one concern of how we ended up where we are, is that this district has not been budgeting enough money for facilities for years. And, you know, eventually these problems are going to come to a head, and that's where we are now. So, you know, we need to make sure moving forward that, you know, there's a plan for all these other projects, and there's a plan for when these projects that we're going to do now are going to come up again. You know, as we know, none of this stuff lasts forever. You know, if you put a 20-year roof on one of these buildings, you're going to have to think about replacing it in 20 years.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, you know, in facility discussions in the last year or so, we've brought, you, Jason, brought that up a lot, is log of everything that needs to be done, when it needs to be done, but also, more importantly, a capital improvement 10-year plan that needs to be in place. I think, to the other point that I wanted to bring up was, what was it? Jason's point. What I would advocate in the budget process starting this year is we start appropriating money to our capital reserve fund that we created 2 years ago. And that should be a priority every year. I don't know what the numbers are right now. We can talk about that when budget time comes, but, you know, we have a 5-year runway, right? If we pass a bond coming up, we probably have a 5-year runway of contributing to that account. We just need to determine what those numbers look like, but I think that will help in the process as well as other future bonds that may be needed. But I think that's, to Jason and your point, Michael, is to plan accordingly, and that's one way we definitely have to continue down that road. So I guess we have Jason's ideas on the table. Maybe we should start discussing what do we think about the looking ahead, and or if anyone has anything else to add to the current discussion. But I think that's our first kind of discussion point that's brought out there. So we're open to talk about that, or if anyone else has anything else they want to just contribute in general on the process.
It would be great to hear from the rest, the whole group. We're a board of 7, and it's wildly frustrating to sit up here and not have all 7 folks part of the conversation. I know this isn't the forum for this, but this is a big deal, and this is one of the most important things we have in front of us. And it's going to take all of us to contribute to this. And as one of 7, it's frustrating to have all 7 of us not contributing to the conversation week in and week out. There's a lot of information here, and there's a lot to discuss. And we obviously got our butts kicked last March. We didn't do a good enough job of explaining and pulling this all the way through. We need to do a better job. And in order for us to do what's right for students and families and teachers and administrators in this town, we all have to contribute to this process. I don't know what else to say. I mean, we've got a ton of information. There's figures, there's dollars, there's projects. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm going off tangent here, but I'm frustrated.
I just want to say along those lines, I know Jeremy and/or Rob have been, and I know school board members have visited the schools prior to this, but we had a lot of activity prior, planning for this meeting. I believe everybody on the school board has spent some hours in the schools with Jeremy and/or with Rob, and going up on roofs and looking at all the different areas and getting a better firsthand perspective about what things actually look like. So I want to commend the school board members for those that have gone to the buildings in the past and those who have gone to the buildings recently. Thank you.
Sure. I echo Jason's frustrations because once again, We are back exactly where we have been. $16 million is not enough. I'll start with that. I'm making an assumption here, but my assumption here is that most of us up here probably agree or have some inclination to agree that generators, based off of the information that Jeremy put together, are important. Electrical systems are important. Sprinklers, I know, are important because I've received emails about that last year when the public became aware of, I guess, sprinklers not being at Grinnell or East Derry. I would assume security is important. I would also assume fire alarms are important. I also believe that if we are going to be investing into our schools, that things like ADA compliance and bringing our schools up to if we're doing a long-term solution, that we are also being in line with ADA requirements and making our classrooms more accessible for every student, because we are a public education facility. I would also venture to say that, you know, if we're repairing our roofs, then we probably also need to do the requisite work that needs to be done on the ceilings that also need to be repaired as well. And then again, to echo David's comment, specifically with East Derry, in the report, it said in 2022 that it would be 7 to 10 years before that needed to be replaced, so that puts us at 2029 to 2032. So again, even if we put that out 5 years from now, we would still be upon that. Looking at that, I would call for an additional almost $10 million in repairs to cover all of those things across all of the district. One thing to consider is that even if we did the 16 or 22 million, that's only covers about 55% of the work that needs to actually be done across the district. So I believe, if we only shoot for the 22 million that's on these priorities, we're going to fall well short of where we actually need to be, and we will fall victim to Jason's scenario, which would be we would have to potentially come back and ask the public for substantially more money, and that's not even bringing into the account that any of these issues that are, quote, in the near future or even 10 years or looking ahead, what will happen to those when they do not get the appropriate attention that they need. So those are my thoughts.
Jonathan, were you, we were just trying to take some notes, were you including Grinnell as well for the for the additional fire system? We don't have one at Grinnell or East Derry.
Yes, yeah, so the two I have here would be Gilbert H. Hood and Barca. I thought that we had fire alarms included in one of the alternative, or one of the priorities before. I could be wrong,
Yep.
So. Sorry, I have sprinklers and fire alarms listed. So sprinklers I have at East Derry and Grinnell. Fire alarms I have at Hood and Barca. Security I have across the district.
Okay, I just didn't hear the Grinnell one, so I just wanted to make sure we were adding that.
Thank you, Jeremy, for the day. I thought I was a hard worker, but today you really after spending 4 hours walking around, so I feel like we're heading. So I think $16 million is small, because everywhere I go with Jeremy, when he give me the number, I write them down. So basically, before I left the buildings, I was around $17 million. So basically, there's a lot of stuff need to be done, and Jeremy probably doesn't bring that up. So the safety is not really. We need to consider that for the kids, because if we don't prepare the building properly, so do the stuff that need to be done, so the kids probably are in danger, because you can see physically, you can see some of the material fall apart on the building. I think all these things need to be repaired, And there's like so many things Jeremy showed me, and I don't even see them on the list right here. So I think like we guys need to make a fast decision. I don't know.
So I think one of the hurdles we're gonna have is, you know, whatever the number is, if it's 22, 27, 30, it's gonna have to be done in a tranche system, but I think we're still gonna get pushback from the town. We need to figure out how to justify is the wrong word, how to promote and have people understand that these are needed. And I get that, and I'm fine with that. I just, at the same time, we need the people that have complained the loudest last year during the deliberative or whatnot at different points in time, we need those guys to support us for obvious reasons. So if we do go down that road to a higher number, whether it's 25, 30 million, whatever that number is, we just need to have a game plan to figure out how to get people on board. And, you know, the more people that are on board, obviously they spread the word, and that's something we need, because, you know, 52% we got last year. We were, I don't know how many votes we were down, with it 400 or 500 votes, I forget what the number was, but, you know, I think we need to be cautious and cognizant of that process.
So just to piggyback off that, yeah, so I agree with 100% of what you just said, David. We are at 52%. Considering, you know, all the factors, you know, I'll be honest, if you told me what transpired with every other warrant article, would we get 52% on the capital improvements? Absolutely not. So I think there is a desire and an understanding from the town and the voters that they realize that serious work needs to be done. I think you hit the nail on the head. If at the beginning you said we need to come to a consensus on needs for a warrant article. A consensus is all of us. That is leaving this room with, you know I'm not gonna, again, I went into last year not necessarily expecting a new school to be passed. It didn't get passed, and so, you know, I come back and I show up and I do the work for what the job that is being asked of us. I think that is what our jobs are, and that is what we should be doing. And so, again, participating and getting everyone's buy-in is tremendously important. And I mean, I think if we had buy-in last year from across the board, I don't think we'd be here today asking for this money. So I hope that we can leave tonight very close, if not at a consensus. But that's, again, that requires hard decisions to be made and compromises to be made on both sides. And again, I said this a month ago or whenever, you know, I'm gonna have my own personal feelings and thoughts, and I may not agree 100% of the way, but I know this, that, you know, if 6 out of 7 of us are fine with, you know, $23 million, I will, you know, I will find my better angels and I will support that, because we cannot go another year without having a substantial investment into these buildings, period.
So I did a walkthrough with Jeremy and Rob the other day. It was very eye-opening for me to see, you know, conditions of the schools and all the reports that we've been seeing, and to really see that firsthand. Going through these reports, I agree with Jason that, you know, we can't just stop at the priorities. I mean, there's so much work that needs to get done. I also want to make sure that we are thinking ahead to the future. You know, we're not really talking about what are we doing with the SAU office, what are we doing with the DVS land, and those things do need to be considered when we're thinking about planning long-term for our district. So I think that we need to make sure that that is also part of our conversation tonight. Thinking about, you know, our strategic planning, curious to see what our community is giving us for information and feedback on how they want to invest in our schools, seeing if, any of that feedback is available yet. I think that that's also important information to incorporate into our plan.
The strategic plan doesn't really, tertiary, you'll have some facilities information, but it's really about operational and envisioning for the district. It's not, facilities runs in parallel to strategic plan. I think the facilities committee this year, next year would have to look at a long-term facilities plan inclusive of the DVS property, which we need to circle back on, as well as South Range. We're gonna, this is talking about putting almost $10 million. What does that mean long-term, right? Because 9.3 million, somebody said it earlier, doesn't get us anywhere close to a renovation or set it and forget it, South Range is done, right? That is really step one and probably several steps to get that building whole. But strategic planning has really been a talk about the meetings and the initial plan is really what is the vision for education in this district. Facilities come into play, but it's more or less how can we work with the spaces we have, and how can we capitalize on the space we have and leverage the space we have and maybe adjust the spaces to fit some of the educational needs versus building. A lot of what was discussed at strategic planning was the facility stuff was low or no cost, right? Just how do you section off rooms and how do you make workspaces more accessible and more open, more inviting. It's not really about big capital improvements and investments for buildings. That's what the facilities committee does, and then that's what this whole board will do as part of this workshop and board meetings. But yeah, 100% right when we think long-term, looking ahead, but we've got to get to March and we've got to start getting some of these projects done sooner rather than later. These things have to run in parallel, right? So we need to figure out what is our 5-year plan, which would be this, and then what comes behind that. That was my previous comment about if we only ask for 22 million, there's probably another 30, 40, 50, potentially more right behind it, depending upon how far we want to go, right? We look back at Jobin and we look back at La Valley Brensinger and what new full renovations. It's a serious commitment there, but we've got to start somewhere. And as Michael said, back of the house stuff, system stuff, this is like, obviously we say priority, it's P1, it has to be done. It can no longer be pushed aside. The kids deserve better. Everybody's been to the buildings, right? Wilbert, it's like taking a step back in time. And these guys and the folks have done an amazing job with what we as a board have given them, but that's not enough. We as a town, as a community, need to decide if we want to invest in public education here in Derry or not, right? Because public education is in the crosshairs. I think we can all agree on that. Regardless of what your mindset is, we need to invest to ensure that our students, our kids, the kids coming behind them, the kids coming behind them, have safe, functioning, reliable, and decent schools to go to, right? And we all want brand new, we all want nice, we all want renovated. We really need to just get to decent in all the buildings before we can start to get to good or better. This plan gets us to decent, and looking at these numbers, it's staggering what getting to decent costs. It's only going to get more expensive. It's only going to get worse if we continue to kick the can down the road. So I'm going to echo what Jonathan said. We need to take a serious hard look at the dollars, and we need to bring this back, hopefully, if the full board agrees, and really take care of what needs to be done. Wilbert, you brought up safety, security, fire, as did Jonathan. These are things that aren't even included in this. We have to make this investment. Have to.
I will say in the tour, having a different set of eyes looking at it from the facilities perspective and not just my traditional role of being a mom in the school and, seeing everything as rosy and great, to see the other side of it was something that I do suggest members of our community go in and, Jeremy had said you can reach out to his team and they'd be happy to show you what's going on. And we talked about, that our schools are safe, but there are all these needs that we do have. And I think it's, as we're pushing through the community, we need to be big on that education and making sure that they really understand why these are needed.
So I want to add that when I was visiting the school, like South French, there's some work like Jeremy showed me. 10 years ago, it wouldn't be that much. It could be like a way less than that it costs now. So basically, what I mean, if we don't really make a good decision, so after 5 years, 10 years, it would be like a way more than that. Because every year, like the price goes up, not go down. So I think like you say, if we can keep pushing it forward, make a bigger decision, I think that would be better for the future.
I'll go back to when I was reading one of the facilities study committee reports. I think it was the one that maybe came out in 2016. They suggested that the district build a new school, and they estimated in 2017 that it would cost, I think it was like $30 million to build a new school in 2013. And as we all know, that's not what it cost. So, yeah, the longer that we push these things out, who knows how much some of these projects are going to cost. And, just to speak to planning, we've gone through incredibly detailed studies and planning processes. You go back to the Valley Brensinger, the work that they did. They were contracted to do an in-depth study of all of the district's facilities and come up with a plan. And the plan that they came up with was comprehensive renovations of all of the buildings to the tune of somewhere around $160 million. And that was 2 years ago. And, I think that, it was agreed upon at the time, and I think we can probably all agree now that's not happening. So, that's where we moved on to, well, what if we fix the schools the way that they are now? And that's where coming out of that Valley Brensinger report, you got all of these projects that need to be completed. And those were all costed out by Jobin Associates in 2023, I think. And now, we're still sitting here in 2024 and we haven't gotten anywhere. So, I think that this is the year where we need to get somewhere.
So a question I would ask the members is, if you prioritize projects, or do you prioritize dollars, right? So if you think about, do you want to go after a specific set of projects to reach an end goal, if that's the priority, or do you have a dollar amount in mind for the sake of packaging it up and bringing that to the public, right? Because there's going to be two different figures there, right? So we need to determine, maybe it's somewhere in the middle. But I think we need to determine maybe individually or share some feedback. If folks have a dollar amount, maybe share that. Or if folks say, hey, let's go after X, Y, and Z, share that. Or let's think about how do we want to break it out to potentially extend the runway on how we can complete the projects, or maybe limit some tax impact here or there, or a combination of the three there. So, because to your point, David, personally, I would like to have some sort of idea of where we're going coming out of tonight. Obviously, administration can go back and fine tune and put together a report or not, a comprehensive, or just adding things, removing whatever it is. But we've really got to have. It's July. It's going to be August before we know it. We're in budget season, and as we knew last year, it came right up on us. And we've got to have a way to get out and communicate and share, and hopefully, to Katie's point, engage some folks to go see the buildings, because it is, if you're not in the buildings and you're not looking at a certain way, you would have no idea, and you would think we're sitting up here just looking for a bunch of money to, make the room shiny or whatever it may be. But it's far from that. Some of the buildings, there's a ton of work going on at Hood, but I said to somebody recently, it's, you almost like going back in time, right? When you walk the halls of some of the buildings, feels like you're going back to the 90s, the 80s, or even further back than that, because of just And I think that's a testament to Jeremy and team of the work that they've done. I know we hear it a lot, right? Well, the buildings aren't maintained, they're not this and not that, but they're doing an amazing job with what we've given them, holding things together, but you can't, you can't block a flood with your thumb, right? It's just, it doesn't work. So I think that's what I would ask of the team here to say, you know, is it a dollar amount because we're conscientious of what the voters are looking at, or is it a project piece and we want to go after specific projects or what's important?
Yeah, I would say for tonight, I think it's more of a project-based discussion. And then, when we hash out what the projects are, these guys can get the updated numbers on what they cost, and we reconvene, and then look at it from a dollar perspective, right? So, I don't know, say we pick whatever we pick tonight, and it comes out, and when they come back to us and it's $32 million, then then maybe that's the meeting we have a discussion on where we at from a dollars perspective. That's just my thoughts, but because tonight it's hard to do that with stale numbers. Yeah, you can kind of in your mind say, yeah, I want to be at this level, but it's hard to pick the projects tonight to do that. But I think if we look at it from a project perspective, have these guys go to Jobin, get the updated estimates, then we come back and hash out the dollar numbers. That's the kind of way I see it, but that's just one way.
I think we need to remember too that everything on this list are things that we will eventually need. It might not be tomorrow. You know, some of these things like, you know, if the parking lot at East Derry needs to be paved within the next 10 years, maybe we don't need to include that in a bond, but we also need to have a plan of, you know, if we don't include it in the bond, we're still going to have to pave that parking lot within the next 10 years. And at some point down the road, we're going to need to come up with the money for that. So, you know, there needs to be in tandem with whatever we end up including in a bond, those other projects that, you know, will need to be done at some point in the future. What's the plan for that? You know, as we go through, and of course, as we know, it's a bottom line budget. We can say today, oh, well, in, you know, 2033, the school board should pave the parking lot at East Derry. But, you know, 2033 could roll around and the school board, whoever's sitting up here in 2033 could say, nah, we don't have the money for that. You know, so I mean, but, you know, we have to have a consistent plan that can be stuck to, you know, over the years. And there needs to be an understanding too that, you know, for the past, I don't know how many years, we've been putting up under default budgets. And I mean, if you're investing in capital projects every year, that's not going to happen, because I'm pretty sure that when you're doing the default budget, like if you put a roof on and you fund it out of the budget, that does not go into the default budget, right? So if you put a roof on one building and then the next year you need to put another roof on another building, like that money is not in the default budget. It has to be added every year. So theoretically, I would think that if you have a robust funding of capital projects included within your budget, you're probably never going to have an under default budget. Is that a correct line of thinking?
Yeah, I think your point is well taken, but I think what the goal would be is once you finalize the projects for this cycle, then you do your capital improvement plan over the next 5 to 10 years, and then you figure out how to pay for it, which we talked about funding a capital reserve, and you could do appropriation from like we did 2 years ago and put it into that reserve fund. I'm not sure you'd do it right out of the budget, but so there's ways to do that. I mean, that's why it's important to figure out the projects that aren't done that need to be done. We just need to put them on a timeline and then figure out how we fund it and when we fund it, and that will kind of help us determine what those appropriations would be for the capital reserves, right? Depending on what your needs are over the next 10, whatever years you're talking about. So I think that's definitely a great line of thinking. I think for today, though, we settle on what the projects are, and then the remainder goes on the timeline.
I think we need to factor that in, though, and that, you know, are there some projects that we can, you know, fund out over in the future, and maybe we don't need to, you know, factor it into a bond this year.
If I could, we're doing some quick basic math. If you look at the facilities priorities at, let's just call it 22.5, 5% is about $1 million, so that brings that to 23.5. Joe looked at the near futures in the secondaries and came up with 4.5, which might be a little bit more than that if you figure in 5% and so forth. So that puts us somewhere in the 28, 29. I think if you guys, now, Michael brought up about South Range being a very expensive thing, so I'm not saying you just look at this facilities priorities and you say you do all of these, but maybe there should be some discussion about, these are what we're, Jeremy and his crew have decided that these are the biggest priorities, looking at what the experts gave us for information. And if some people may say, I think we should do all of these. Well, okay, there's 23.5 right there. Others might say, do some of South Range, don't do all, whatever they might say, or don't do this thing right now, put that off. I think it was Jonathan who mentioned some of the secondary things, like some of the fire alarms and things like that. I think if we look at, if you're interested in doing those, we can pull some figures with the help of the rest of the crew here so that we can start throwing out some, getting to a monetary amount
That's kind of where I was going,
as well as the
Austin, is-
project amount, the project priorities.
Sorry.
Yeah, for me, in the looking ahead section, I mean, a lot of this stuff, you know, I think is very important to the look and feel of these buildings and, you know, what the students have in their classrooms. And a lot of these things also impact, you know, energy efficiency and, you know, other costs that are connected to these things, you know, throughout the district, right? Like, you know, if we have a building that has 60-year-old windows, it's probably costing us a lot more to heat that building because, you know, with the whole roof with holes in it and the 60-year-old windows, how much heat are we just losing out into space? You know, so some of these projects, you know, you've got to think of, you know, in different contexts, you know, from an energy efficiency, you know, perspective, you know, replacing windows, doors, these kinds of things are going to save the district money in other areas over periods of time.
So when I look at this and when I brought up the total dollar, to me, it's almost like we're circling back on what was presented last year, right? So if we think about, and you'd have to kind of add in escalation from last year to this year, but 3 tranche, just about 37, factor it in, all the things we're talking about now, that's kind of where we end up, right? So my opinion is what we presented last year was a solid plan that spread things out and gave us some runway and really shored up a lot of things. Because when we start to talk about specific projects, we're all gonna, you might pick this or pick that or eliminate this, eliminate that. I think when we talk about a dollar, David, it would be easy for us to say, hey, this was 37 million. If you call it 40, right? I'm just throwing out a figure. They go back and they bring it back, and then we say, you know what, we're not comfortable with 40 for whatever reason, right? So now what can we prioritize and maybe eliminate to bring that number back a little bit? But I think the plan that we presented last year was a solid plan, right? I think we probably put a lot on out there, the school, the other things, we try to do too much, right? But that was a solid plan that was laid out pretty well. The missing piece, and I said at the last meeting, is that we didn't explain well enough, what Jeremy and team have now done. So when we get the questions about casework, millwork, et cetera, we can refer back to this report. Because I believe what we did last year was right. We didn't get it right. The voters didn't have the confidence, but I think we were close. And I think with a little bit of work and the 7 of us all paddling in the same direction, we can get there. And that number, our committee last year, we were confident in that number. That gave us a pretty good foundation to get to decent and a little bit beyond. So that's kind of why I threw the number, the figure out. It's probably a little easier for them to go, okay, here's what we're working with, and have Jeremy prioritize versus us saying, I think this or I think that. that's just my opinion, right? You guys know, we've all seen the schools, we talk about this, we've read the reports over and over again, but I don't spend 40, 50, however many hours a week you guys are in the buildings. I don't, thankfully, right? That's not my job. That you guys have that job. So I would rather give you guys a number, bring it back, and then us kind of hash out where we feel from there. But I think last year with the 3 tranches at 37 million is solid.
Thanks. And I want to pick up on what you said about close, because I think you're right on. I don't know if I'm going to get the figures right, but somebody on the school board, of all the things that we lost it, and I know it's not horseshoes, but we lost it close. It was like 52 and we needed 60 or something like that. So when you look at the number of votes and so forth, I do think now that we've gone through that, now that we're going to simplify things as far as what's going forward in March, and as you said, with all these explanations, I do believe that we can do a better job of promoting, showing the public exactly what this money is going to be slated for and what will be done in the buildings. And
Not having a new school on the ballot to
Exactly.
overpower things.
Right.
It was a lot, right? I mean, as a taxpayer, you look at it, it's a lot. It's aggressive plan, understanding that but we've got to take care of these. They're only getting worse and more expensive every year. And if we can get something that gives us a little bit of time and some term, then it's not going right back to the voters in a couple years to say, hey, we need more money again. Maybe we're able to fund, maybe we're able to find other ways to fund and keep the impacts reasonable. My concern, my fear is not doing enough and then sitting here next year going, geez, we should have done this, we should have done that. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? Because we all agree that's a lot.
So I think a lot of what you said is right, Jason, but I think the biggest thing that you said is confidence. We lost it, and we need to regain it, 100%. I think one of the biggest ways that we can do that is not have people call Jeremy and set up tours by themselves so that takes up his whole day, because we've all done that, right? And I've said this to David, if every one of us calls Austin or Jane during the day and take up an hour of their day, when do they get their work done? When does Jeremy and Rob complete all the things that they have to complete with their team if everybody needs an hour of their time? And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, because I do think it's really important. I think it would be better if we set up specific times at each school on different days, or how, I don't know how to make that work, but I think if people could see the work that's being done and could understand how much is needed and see it with their own eyes, hear Jeremy and Rob explain what they're doing and why, and how this got to be where it was, we got a winning ticket. But without that, we don't have the confidence in the town. And I understand that. And we had a lot, we asked a lot. But another piece of this is, what's our budget going to look like? We have a budget that is going to impact the taxpayers. We have a potential, or hopefully a teacher's contract on the ballot too. So we need to think about all the things we're going to be asking the taxpayers to fund. I think these are important. I thought they were important last year. We didn't lose it by that much. But I think the bigger piece is for these 4 residents to go on a tour and see what's going on at Hood, what's going on at Grinnell, what's going on at South Range, what's going on at Hood, and at East Area and at Barca. They can see the work. They can physically see the work and see what has been done and what hasn't been done, or what has to be done. And some of the things that we've talked about, I've been over to Hood several times. The walls that were put in there years ago that were movable Well, they're not really movable, but they're movable. They were movable. You could use them as a chalkboard because you could write on them. So it was kind of a fad, and we've talked about fads and trends, right? Well, I have talked to Jeremy about them a lot. While they seem great, when we fall into something like that, we really need to look at it and say, sounds great right now, but what's going to happen in 5 years? And is that wall really movable? Is it really going to make things easier when we need another classroom because we've hit a bubble? And we can move that wall logistically and perfectly so that it makes another classroom, but it doesn't make it too small. Like, those are the things that, not saying that they were wrong back then, because I know they were trying to fit 1,500 kids in Hood without all the additions. But those are other things that we need to really look at as we're going along. But I really think tours are really important. I know that means more time for them, but I think it matters for the community.
It's a great point, Brenda. I wonder, maybe Cliff and team, if it's possible to, sort of like what Joe did with the new school, we kind of had the virtual tours. Is it possible to maybe still have the availability, or like we had the info nights, maybe we set some things up, specific nights to go visit some schools? But I think an artifact that maybe lives on our website under facilities, if Cliff and Jonathan, maybe you guys can spend some time and go through and video and record, and Jeremy can kind of walk through some things and highlight some things, highlight some of these big ticket items, edit it together. You know, understanding it wouldn't be a quick hit, quick clip, but if people want to watch a 15 or a 20-minute video that kind of goes through everything, or they do it by school or something, would probably be helpful. Then it's sort of lives there and it's done.
Yeah, definitely a good point. What I would say is, let's check out the videos we did last year and what the hit rates were, because we may want to have it in person. Like Brenda said, if you schedule every Wednesday at 8 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night, we're going to tour, I don't know, whatever the schedule looks like. That may be more, I think you might get more bang for your buck. Let's just check the hit rates, because I don't want these guys, that's a lot of work, I think, if we only got like a couple hundred people who viewed it.
A couple hundred people is the difference, potentially, right, from 52 to 60.
And I will say this, when we were trying to remove 36 portables in the district, we opened schools on Saturday. And I know, I even hate to say that to Jeremy, but we opened schools on Saturday and said, come visit. Come see what our kids are living in and learning in. Look at what teachers are teaching in. Look at how we're trying to manage all of these different things to not spend too much money, right? And those tours made a difference. People, you can see a video, but when you see it with your own eyes, because I know Rob's got a lot of pictures up on Facebook. He's taken a lot of pictures of the work and why it's being done, what's there and what's not there. But I don't know how many people are really seeing that. And it's summer, that's the other piece of it, right? But it's important. I think while the video is great, and I know it's a lot of work, I also think it's important for people to see. And do they come? I mean, you can invite them, they don't have to come. Maybe we have cookies and punch or something, but the PTAs may be able to help with that. But I do think, I know back when we were trying to remove 36 portables, it made a giant difference. Just, we had a whole school.
It's funny, when we had our two community forums last year, and one of them was at Jerry Village and one of them was at South Range, and that was kind of the idea when we scheduled them to be in those buildings, was that it would be an opportunity for the community to come and see those buildings. I think we talked about doing tours or something in coordination with those forums, but it just didn't happen. But I mean, I think that both things are important. I mean, I think that, if there is a way that we can arrange, for public tours of the building, like obviously, at scheduled times, whenever that may be, we don't want these guys to be tied up constantly just giving individual people tours through the buildings. I think in tandem with that, we should also, build out a website and have videos, because, I mean, even if we offer tours, not everybody has the time to come down and spend, an hour walking around a school with, these guys. I mean, a lot of people, we're talking about, working parents here. People are busy. If there's something, if there's something that, we can offer people, online in terms of, videos. We had talked about building out a website with these lists and having pictures accompanying each of the items, so that people can see what we're talking about. I mean, I think it's important to have all of those options available.
No, those are all good points. And I'd like to know the hit rates though still, but definitely great points, and I think that's something we've talked about. And we talked about like you said, the linking to the different pictures and the buildings through the website. That stuff all matters and will contribute to what we need. But let's get back to the question at hand. I think Jason threw out there, do we want to put up a number that we're all comfortable with and then have these guys come back with the priorities that will fit under that number? Or the other option is, actually Jason brought this one up too, is top priorities plus in near future, then any other ideas on looking ahead that we want to add in, we can go that route too. I'm open to both. I think both will be productive, but we can decide what works. Let's decide what works better so we can structure the conversation around that and try to move forward with.
So maybe as a jumping off point from that, like, obviously the facilities team presented us a facilities priorities for 22 and change. Is there anything on this list that anyone here feels should not be a part of this? Because I think, I mean, at a minimum, for me, at a minimum, these are the things that need to be done. Now, again, I have my concerns about putting 10 million into South Range versus other schools, but I don't see anything on that list that is like, maybe we can do without that. So can we, can we get a consensus on that at least?
I would agree. Looking at these lists, it's extremely difficult to take anything off. They all are really important and all need to get done.
Yeah, I agree. They definitely need to be done, but I think there's ways to get them done, right? So if you focus on the top stuff that we leave today with, if we start contributing to a capital reserve fund each year, then in those 5 to 10 year projects, you can start using cash in those capital reserves and other mechanisms through the budget process to fund different projects that are none of these projects, you know what I mean? When I say lesser priority, I don't mean, it's just, there's other things that are up here and there's things that can wait according to the report here when it's 5 to 10 years out. So I think ideally, yes, but keep in mind when you say that, you're up in the 40-something million range now because we have a lot more items for South Range than we did last year. I think it's $6 more million than we had last year, I believe, at South Range. So now you're in the $44 million range, which I'm not opposed to, but I think realistically, it's not going to happen, in my opinion. But I would propose a more reasonable number where we get the top priority stuff in the near future stuff, and then cherry pick stuff that from the longer distance items, and then go from there. Whatever that number, if that number is 30 million or whatever the number is, I think we should focus in that area. That's kind of where I'm at with that.
So and again, these may not be exact or perfect, but if we look at the top priorities, that's 22 million and change. If we look at the near future items, that's 3.2 million. I don't know if that's accurate, not including any contingency, but if we include the same amount percentage-wise contingency, that's another $1 million right there. And then that list of things that I went through: generators, electrical systems, sprinklers, security, fire alarms, ADAs, ceiling repairs, roof, that's another 11.5 million. That puts it at a total of 38 million total. So that's 6 million below what your number is, or not what your number is, but the high, yeah. Right. So that, I don't know. I'll be honest, there's things on the 10 years ahead that I'm like, I don't want to leave off of. Like, we talk about modular panels, we talk about bleachers, locker rooms. I didn't even include any casework. There's parking lots that need to be done. So that number, again, if people want to, could go a little bit higher if there's other projects that are specific. But again, those are the ones that I called out, which would bring it to 38.
Jeremy, can you talk a little bit about the generators? This information about the West Running Brook generator that powers emergency smoke exhaust fans, but like there's other things it should power, correct?
Say that again? The emergency exhaust fans, did you say why?
Well, I'm thinking about generators, the use of a generator. And to me, the generator at a school should do more than power
I
exhaust
agree.
fans.
Yeah, then that's why they're on here. But the one at West Running Brook just runs those fans in the event that there is a fire and they lost power, then they could still vent the building.
So do you have an idea of what the cost of a generator is?
We talked about that a lot, and there's just so much to it. It would be a decision from us of what we want the generator to cover, whether it's the whole building or just sections of it. It would be different at Hood because that building has multiple services in different places. The building's very spread out. So it's tough to say.
So we do have a figure of
Like putting it in
180,000.
your house, I guess, huh?
Yeah, just for reference, a school in, I don't even know where, Cameron, somewhere other, purchased two. One was the elementary school generator was $276,000. The high school generator was $651,000. That did not include the labor, concrete, pad installation, or hookup of the machines, which was another $500,000.
And
So I
would
put a
say
placeholder in for like
that would
150.
Probably for, something that takes care of the whole building. We kind of broke it down of what the issues that we have when we lose power in a building. Some of it's Cliff stuff. We get no internet in the district if we lose power at Hood. East Derry is on a septic with a pump system, so it needs to pump up. So if we lost power there in the morning, we wouldn't be able to have school there until power was restored. We have a lot of problems with losing a phase, so we have 3 phases to each building. If we lose one, the motors typically don't like that. So a lot of times we have an issue somewhere in the building with a specific air handler, or last year it was the elevator at West Running Brook. So, there's different things we could do even if we just monitored the power and we're able to shut stuff down without doing the process that we're required to do now to make sure we don't lose any equipment or flood the building or have something freeze on the roof. If it happens during a major storm and say we can't get there, then it could be catastrophic.
So this is encouraging, right? I think we've got a consensus that we know all of these things need to be done. I would propose that we have the administration go back, include everything on these reports in totality, come back with that figure with regards to whatever the escalation looks like, and then we need to make a decision. We would make a decision at that point if the number is too high, to David's point, and we didn't think it was the right thing to do, or if we are satisfied and potentially eliminate things, and then we'd have to go back to Jeremy and go, okay, if we wanted to cut X million of dollars off, you've got to find $5 million that we need to take off this total number, bring back to the board what you would prioritize to take off and leave, and then make a decision from there. I think, because we can kind of nitpick through all this stuff, but we know all this stuff needs to be done. Let's see what today's number estimate might look like, or next year's number, right? And understand if we have the stomach for it at that point with when the number comes back. And if we don't, then it's a matter of reprioritizing and getting to a number that we can all agree on. And then Jeremy and team deciding what needs to go and what doesn't with input from the board.
I agree 100% with that. The only thing I would add is, we talked about capital reserve. So I would love to have, Jane, don't kill me, like maybe a couple scenarios where we could, hey, this is what our, how we can fund some of these through capital reserve, right? So that we can put in, I don't know what the number, I'm going to say 20,000, we could put 100,000. I don't know what that might be per year. And then by year 5, we'll have money to put towards something that is 5 years out or something like that. I don't know if anyone else has that train of thought, but it's just something with the capital reserve where maybe we can see the dollar amounts that we put in there and a tax impact that that would potentially have, or we could make it project specific, but just something with capital reserve.
So let me clarify a little bit. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, approximately 23.5 and another 4, approximately 28 or so, and I think, Jonathan, you went through those numbers for the priorities and the near future. And I believe that that's what Jeremy and Rob and the rest of the crew would be figuring out, that, yes, we need the priorities, and the next step, if there's more money, would be the near future. So then, with the looking ahead, I think it was helpful. Jonathan, you sort of cherry-picked a little bit through the looking ahead. I think if Jeremy and Rob and them got some of the school board's input as far as preferences, because some of the things might be, oh, we could do this or we could do this, as far as the looking ahead. Is there a little more leeway with the looking ahead, so that if we got some input like you gave from all of the school board members of what they'd be interested in as far as the looking ahead, that might
Yeah,
help with the
I mean, I guess my method behind my train of thought is, when I'm going through this information and I see that we look ahead and we've got 4 schools that, or actually really, I guess 6 schools that need generators, because the 2 that we have probably aren't sufficient enough. So we need 6 schools there. We need 4 that will have electrical systems, 6 that will need security systems upgrades, 4 that will need ceiling repairs, 4 that will need ADA, and 5 that will need ceiling repairs. Those issues aren't going away, right? So in my mind, these are things that I hope, I don't know if this is feasible at this point, but my hope is that we can not only get funding for electrical systems, but because we're doing them all at once, we're getting more bang for our buck, so it makes things cheaper. I don't know if that's feasible, because I also know electrical systems are inside of walls, and all of that stuff has to happen in a certain way, but I don't know, maybe there's more bang for our buck that we're able to capture with things that are systemically, or system throughout our district, that, just, again, trying to think more of, again, more value, because these are all similar projects, even though they're going to be at different buildings.
So I guess that's kind of, Wilbur and I talked about that a lot today, and, we looked at some doors that we replaced, and we looked at doors that need to be replaced. The frame is rotting out at the bottom. The door is not rotted, to the exterior, but the door functions just fine. It's unsightly, but we replaced one that failed. So should we replace all of them that are rusty and will fail at some point? Yes, but they're not failed right now. So do you put $250,000 into replacing all the doors when they actually work right now, but they're unsightly? That's the decisions that I guess you'd have to make collectively. And that's the same with like the ADA compliance, South Range. And I don't remember what that number is, but it's a huge number to make it ADA compliant. And again, walking with Wilbur today, I showed him one of the doors that are between the classrooms, and I took a picture of them, and the door is exactly as wide as Wilbur, right? So it was like, will that ever be ADA compliant? No. Does that building have ADA compliant bathrooms? Yes. You just have to strategically put children that would need that, or adults that would need that, in that area. So in the La Valley Master Plan, they put on, they put ADA compliance. This building was built in the 60s. It doesn't conform to today's standards. We probably, I don't know about everybody else, but are we ever going to do that? Probably not. So yeah, it was just different things like the casework, the millwork at East Derry. It's all unsightly. Does the door open and close? Yes, it does. So it's all on the La Valley report. We've drilled down that report a bunch of different times, but I guess collectively, and actually, where we came with the priority list was, that's kind of things we can't live without. And And I wouldn't say that, you know, fixing these doors and the casework is a want. Eventually, we're gonna have to do that. So, but has it failed today? No, I mean, the buildings are safe. If it failed tomorrow, we'd replace it next week, you know, but at thousands of dollars, you know, per door frame and, or whatever we need to do. So I guess that's the decision that is tough to make, is do we, like, we can add that to the list. Does it need it today? No. The buildings are safe and secure, but, you know, and it's also different if you look at the schools right now than if you look at them when the teachers have them all decorated and they have, you know, all the color on the walls and everything is beautiful. You take all that out so that our crews can clean it, then you see the deficiencies. They just punch you right in the face and you're like, holy cow, this does not look like I thought it did, you know? And that, you know, walking around with you guys just kind of makes that apparent, you know, you don't see that during the school year.
And for some of the numbers, to get more drilled down, for example, the roof at South Range or any other roof project, if the board wants to invest in contracting with ARM to actually have a plan and specs for that roof, then Jobin can give a closer estimate for how much it's going to cost, and maybe some of those contingency costs could go a little bit lower. So if we want to invest in ARM this fall and have them do that, or Gale to have them do the specs for the facade for South Range, those are two big projects. If the board wants to have those reports done, you could get a little bit closer, accurate cost for those things.
All right. These are all good points. I think, to Jason's point, I think we need to figure out which methodology we want to go here. If you want to say, go back with your list and come back with a number, that's fine. I don't think that's productive, but that's fine. We can do that. Or we come up with a number tonight between us and then have these guys allocate what they think is priorities on that number. That's fine too, whatever you guys want to do.
So can I ask a question? Because we have a priority list, right? So are we asking them to add in the near future items from, what is this report called? Secondary considerations? Is that what we're asking for?
I think
I think at
This-
minimum, we have to add in
So
those.
I don't want to, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like Jason's recommendation or suggestion was to take everything on here, give us a maximum amount that is everything on this list, right? And then we really have we've set a floor, right? Because that was the question I asked about 22.5 million. What's the max? And then I think if I would like to have as much of a consensus as tonight, but if we don't have a final number, great. But even if we come up with a number, my ask, and whether it's here or, you know, via email, will be, all right, what are the things that are going to be left off? Because we're still, in my opinion, those are still things that we're going to have to do, whether it's in 5 years or 10 years. And the one thing I think all of us have to come to an understanding is, if we ask for anything less than what we're all willing to do, right? Then, like, we're taking out we're looking at a 20-year bond. Like, I can tell you the people that will be sitting in there will say, well, we don't want the school district to come back to us for an extended period of time for more money to do these repairs. So I think that's something we all have to rectify as well. But yeah, I don't know. I think, again, at the very least, it seems like we're at facilities priorities, plus in the near future, I would prefer to add some of those things looking ahead.
And Jonathan, that's kind of my point of where we had the plan last year, because that gives us, to what you said a little while ago, David, it gives us time to start to accrue in capital reserve while we complete these projects and start to build a little bit of a nest egg if an emergency comes up, or to prioritize some of the larger projects that go out beyond what this would include. None of this is final, right? So if they come back and say it's 40 or 42 and we all go, not feeling great about it for X, Y, or Z, I'd feel better at this number, and then we can start to whittle it down. And I think once the board comes to an agreement, then it would make sense to, like we did last year with the information nights, to bring this to the public and give a presentation and allow for public comment, just to understand kind of what the thoughts are with what, and obviously people can share at meetings, but outside of that, the board agrees to this dollar amount, we are aligned on this, here's what we think, now let's bring it to the public, and whether that's 10 people who show up or 500 people who show up and share their thoughts, but let's put it out there and get as much feedback on it as we can, because Brenda hit the nail on the head, right? If we don't have confidence, that's a way that we've got to be able to build back some confidence and take into consideration, the thoughts of where the voters are. But I mean, we were all in last year on that plan, and my position hasn't changed, right? That the things that we put on the plan last year and the way we presented it, I thought it was responsible. I thought it was the best possible scenario, given the work that the district has to do.
Can I just remind everybody, if looking at Jonathan's numbers again, I believe Jonathan came up with a rough 38 million. So I would suggest that facilities priorities, near future from the secondary, and some of the looking ahead has got us already, on quick math, 38 million. It doesn't include, I'm looking at East area here, gymnasium, cafeteria, dividing wall, and so forth. Can the school board at this time discuss whether or not we're all ready? Because I'd hate to have these guys do more priorities that is going to go 45 or something like this if you guys are always like, 38 is already too much. So maybe a quick little discussion about, because again, that is facilities priorities, near futures from secondary, and some of the looking aheads, security, ADA compliant, what was the other one? Electrical stuff and so forth. That puts us at 38 million with an understanding that there's more in this secondary document as far as looking ahead that we have not added in yet. Should we keep going and bring this into the 40s?
So I agree with Austin there. I think what we're asking or suggesting is something that we could have not had this meeting for. We could have asked this without having this meeting tonight. And I'm not trying to be flip or anything like that. I'm just being honest. If you want them to put everything in this list and into a number, we didn't need this meeting for that, I think. But like I said, if that's the road everyone wants, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I think if we're all being honest and we share what we think is the right path that will get us something that passes, I don't see how $38 million gets it done. I think we need to be more realistic, and don't get me wrong, everything you said I agree with. I was on this committee with you last year, I agreed with everything you said. But at the same time, we got to be realistic, and we got to be smart about this, right? Lack of a better term.
So what's a realistic number that?
Yeah, so,
that- we're dancing around it here.
And
Let's just
I'm
get into it and let's get
yes,
to a number,
I
right?
agree. Then I think we should all talk about that and figure what that is.
before you get there, right?
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. I know I've heard it. We tried to push it through last year, right? This kind of goes back to the beginning. Like, I've thrown out a number. I feel like Jason's thrown out a number. David, you're ready to throw out a number. I guess, like, at this point, like, everybody needs to have a number, and then we need to find a compromise, like, because we've all agreed that 22.5 is the minimum. If you're fine with 22.5 million and 6 other people are fine with that, then, you know, I'm at this point, like I said, I'm ready to get on board with that. I think we need to do more than that, which is why I came up with 38. So it'd be great for everyone to share their number. And I know that's difficult, but that is what the purpose of this meeting is.
If I could share a number, Joe's been sitting here diligently banging away, and I'm looking at a list that says priorities, near future, looking ahead, total projects, soft costs 15%, construction management 15%, contingencies 10%, and totals. And he's got East Derry, West Running Brook, Gilbert H., Grinnell, Ernest B. Barker, South Range, a total, and then a 5% escalation, which would mean that would be if all of this got done next year, because if they're talking 3 to 5 every year, it would be more. We're at 49 million. So if we can trust Joe's math, which I have trusted in the past and have found it to be accurate, facilities priorities and the secondaries, we're looking at right about 49 plus. If that helps with the 38 and all the rest of those things.
My opinion is the number that we had last year is solid, sub 40, 3 tranches, and that gets us a lot of stuff done. And that gives us a good amount of time to plan, execute, and continue to accrue. I'm happy with 38 million. So I will put my position. I was happy with the plan we did last year. Obviously, projects might shift, might change, but I think that number makes sense. And honestly, again, Jonathan said it, but if the 6 of you said a different number, and it made, I want to get something too, but for me, 1 of 7, 38 million makes sense. It makes me comfortable in the fact that we're taking care of a lot of the things that need to be addressed, and gives the district and gives us some breathing room to start to address some of the other things.
But I think we also have to remember the number of people that spoke at deliberative and wanted us to do it in phases, but not in phases at the same time, right? They wanted us to change to 10 or 15, do the work, and come back. And I get that that's also work, to come back again and again and again. But I think that that's something that's in the back of my mind. Because
Agreed.
It goes back to the confidence, right?
Agreed, but we have to be crystal clear that the plan says it's 15 and 250, you know what I mean? Because it's a big lift and it's a big ask, because we all know it's easy to go, we just said yes to 15 or 20 million, we're good. And now we're scrambling again to try to get, I agree with you.
I
It's,
get it. But at the height of that bond, it was 65 cents, right? And then going down. So we also need to think about that, and a budget and the other things that we have. I'm just trying to be realistic about what will pass, because I want whatever we put on, including a budget, to pass.
so it's 15 million is what you're comfortable with?
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we need to, I'm just throwing that out. We need to remember what people said and what they wanted us to do. And, you know, I don't know if that was right or wrong, but that was
Look
the
at more than
mindset.
half of the voters agreed with that plan, right? And that's kind of, and yeah.
Yep, I agree.
So basically, honestly, it's not the money, it's not the number. It's like the community we get don't get involved. It seems like we guys like arguing about this money, not arguing, but talking about it, but we don't think about the community. That's why bring that idea would be a good idea, like open door on Saturday. So have the community to come to see the work, they know where they invest the money. So I think that kind of bring them closer to us, to our idea. If we ask 40 millions or 38 millions, whatever, those are good numbers. Because when I say today, when I went there, I asked all those stuff need to be done. That changed my mind, that changed the way I used to think before. So, you know how many people out there, if we do like an open door on Saturday, so how many people mind we can change, so we get the community involved. I think we need to think about about a good idea to get people get involved. So in that way, we not gonna get turned down later on.
And getting back to what Brenda and Jason were just talking about, this is mid-July. And I don't know if you're going to mention about August 6th at some point. So there's going to be opportunities for delegates and individuals. So the school board can get some ideas about what they're thinking might be a good figure, and then look for delegates and individuals to give some feedback. I don't want to say we've got plenty of time, because we're doing this all now because we want to get some idea of where this is going to go. But we do have some opportunities, and I know it's still summer and not everybody is around and all that, but we can start getting feedback if the school board, because I think that's important, and I do believe it was some strong voices that were saying that. But maybe when they see these lists and they hear what we're talking about, they might understand why the need is great for a one-time, I think, Michael, you said that, 20-year bond or whatever that's going to cover these things, and it's going to take care of so much in one fell swoop. But we will have time to get feedback as well, because you're doing this so early.
And when people have the opportunity to see the work that's being done, I think that will make a difference, right? They can feel confident that it is being done. And things are being updated and upgraded and improved with their own eyes.
And maybe it would be a good idea to even just start with even our new fiscal advisory. Maybe we set up some walkthrough dates. I know we have some fiscal advisory members might be here in our audience. Maybe just setting up times for them so that when they do come into budget process, they've seen the work that's being done, and it might help them through budget.
Yeah, those are great ideas. So what I'm hearing is, do we not want to commit? Because we're dancing around it, so I don't know what you tell me, because if we don't want to commit tonight, that's fine. I'm okay with that, but let's not dance around the question. So you guys let me know. I'm more than happy to go one by one and ask people what they feel is the proper, not proper, their gut feeling on how we proceed.
Right now, we have 238s, I think.
Yeah, I'm writing them down, yeah.
I can support the 38, and I think that we can get our community to do the same. I just think we need to be smart about how we do it, how we plan to spend it. And again, my earlier concerns about, how we're going to be using our current resources, the DVS land, the SAU office, that property, we really do need to bring that into our decisions, because those are going to be coming into play, in the time we're looking to spend this money and complete these projects. Those are also concerns as well. But I do believe, based on, the votes last year, that we do have the community behind us in investing in our buildings.
I don't think it needs to be 38 million or going back to the number that we did before, but I do think that we should do this in an all-inclusive way, whether that, I don't know what the final number comes out to, whether it's 30 million or whatever, but I don't think that it makes sense to do a $15 million bond and then have to come back in however many years it is and ask for another bond, because you're going to get a whole host of people who are going to say, well, we just gave you $15 million 5 years ago, because not everyone is paying attention to the level that some other people are paying attention. So, to me, I don't think that is a winning strategy, but I also think that we can do a bond for a lesser amount if we do it in tandem with some long-term planning. There are projects here that we're going to need but they're not urgent. We don't need to do them today. We might need to do them in 10 years or, however many years in the future. And we need to have a plan for whatever we don't fund over over a bond, whether those projects are completed out over 5 years. What are those other projects? When are we going to do them, and how are we going to pay for them? There needs to be a plan for that long term, whether they're funded out of the budget, they're funded out of a capital reserve. We just need to have a plan. I think that's one of the biggest problems that there has been over the last many years, is that there hasn't been a plan.
So I think, Jason and I talked about this before, I think, when the time is right and we do start to, and Katie, to talk to community members, I think you start the legislative committee, right? You got 6 people there that are heavily involved in this community, that have a lot of pull and sway in this community. Getting them on board to whatever the estimated decision looks like is vital. Because, at the deliberative, those are the people who stand up, right? The people who have been around town forever, the people who know a lot of people in town. These are the guys who stand up and give their thoughts on how we should proceed. So I think starting there, and I think you mentioned, Jason, starting there is a great opportunity to do that right off the bat, right? And I'm assuming you got meetings coming up in the near future, so that's a great opportunity. And I agree with Michael. Whatever we do, coming back twice is not an option to me. It's the way I look at it is, I'm not at 38 million, I'll be honest with you. I think I am not comfortable gambling this district's facilities on this. I'm just not. And if we don't get something this year, I don't even want to go down that road. So I'm not comfortable with that, and I cannot support that kind of money. I can do somewhere in the 25 to 30 range over a 2-tranche system. I'm okay with that, but I can't go to 38 right now. That's just where I'm at, and I don't feel comfortable risking this critical vote, running back the same thing from last year. That's where I'm at.
I'd encourage you to have some faith. I'd encourage you to have some faith.
I do. I worked my butt off last year, and I got
agree.
I got
agree,
smacked down with a heavy glove.
I
Well,
agree.
not just me, we did. And so you forgive me for.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I'm just encouraging you to have some faith. When I sit here and I hear, when I see it with my own eyes, my mind has been changed. And when I hear people again, when the effort is put forth, whether it's by us or anyone else, the stuff, it just sticks out. It's not hard to see that there is so many deficiencies in our district. So I'll tell you this, to have 2 people that I don't think were in big support of it last year. I don't know, this is just an assumption, but to hear that, I will be honest, Brenda seems to appreciate and understand, and same thing that you do, David, that we can't let another year go by without this.
Are you implying that I didn't think it was important last year? Because that's false.
So when I hear the buy-in from, again, people that I don't think fully supported these things last year, again, I do have faith that, to get us from 52 to 60% is not unfathomable. And again, we don't have a new school on there, so there's no confusion to be had about, well, we're doing both. There's the inclusion of South Range, which we've heard from that neighborhood. And so if you're in that neighborhood and you can't get behind $10 million being put into your school, then show up to the school and take the tour. But if it's some sort of semblance of this, or even the $22.5 million that we're looking at, I have a hard time believing we won't get the appropriate buy-in, as long as, again, we have that same buy-in on the board, and we continue to do, we build upon what was done last year. So that's my thoughts, David. So that's why I would say maybe have a little bit of faith.
And David, when you go for the, you're saying you'd be more comfortable with the lower number, is that because you're also, kind of wanting to build into the capital improvement projects and things like that to build in that fund? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think we can maybe come up with a little bit lower of a number. I mean, again, doing 15 and still leaving all these other projects on the table, I don't think is an option. But I think we can, look at some of these projects, some of the things that are in the looking ahead. I mean, some of these things that are looking ahead, I think, are important to do now. If we're going to replace roofs, I think we should replace ceilings in tandem with them. I think, replacing doors, I think, is important, and that plays into the energy efficiency of these buildings. Casework, I think, is important. That plays into what, the teachers and students are dealing with in their rooms every day. But, I do think there are some things here that you could probably look at long-term funding outside of a bond.
Which is what we'd have to do, because Austin and Joe's figure was 49, so that 38 isn't all-inclusive. So if you're taking the $11 million off, that's stuff that either is hopefully funded over the course of however many years on the budget, but I mean, I think we need to come to some sort of ballpark tonight to make this meeting worthwhile, right? To at least have some direction, people can comment, and then we can move along, because we're still dancing, right? We think this, we think that. I think we need to take a hard line approach, and if the group says it's this number, let's start with that number and see what people say and see where we go. If the group says another number, but we could sit here for another 2 hours and go, I think this, I think that, this is important for this reason. We've said all that over and over and over again. Let's put pen to paper and let's start working towards whatever the goal is that we set. And if the feedback is overwhelming, then we adjust. But we've got to start somewhere.
And I was not implying that the 15 was the right number. I was reminding us of what people said.
100%.
Because it's
I'm
important.
with
I
you.
did not say, that wasn't my words or my wants. Jeremy, can I ask you, and I know this is a crazy kind of really involved question, but last year we had 37, and the number that's on the priority list is 20, whatever it is, 22. So can you give me some kind of an idea of what isn't in that 22 that was in the 37? Is that a crazy question to ask you right now?
A lot of the second phase
two,
stuff,
phase
that was the
three.
look ahead, and then the one that was 5 to
And
10
that's what I
years
thought,
out.
but I just wanted to kind of verify that with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we had last year, all of the roof replacements, all the door replacements, the sprinkler systems, all those kinds of things, they were all included in the number that we put together last year.
And I don't think that number included South Range at the time.
It included, it included a handful of short-term projects.
Right, which brings us over that 37 to where Joe came up with, and then.
Thank you.
As part of this too, I mean, we talked about the La Valley plan at 160 million for complete new renovation. We can't be short-sighted in the sense that we're just doing the bare minimum and band-aiding, because the hamster wheel spins. So we have to be somewhat smart and do some of these projects that are looming, because we've all said it, they're not going anywhere. And if we're going to ask the voters to make an investment, we need to get whole. Well, we've got to start to address some of these long-term things, because some of these things haven't been addressed. And if we do this once and it's not enough, then what? And if budget year is going to be tough every year. So how much realistically are we going to be able to accrue and put into a capital reserve, right? That number, we don't know. Jane's going to have to look. We have to talk about it this year, but that's a gamble right there, David. I mean, I think, I don't know. I think we need to at least have a ballpark tonight and walk away with a ballpark. Let these guys kind of retool it, look at it, come up with the figure, and then hear some feedback and move forward.
Yeah, that's fine.
I would
So-
rather people say, I want 30, and Jonathan said it earlier, if 5 of you said, I want 30, or 4 of you, we said 38, if the majority said 30, I would support 30, but let's,
No, I think right now
let's
the
make some moves.
majority's at 38, so that's where we land right now. I'm okay with pushing that number forward. If everyone else is, that's the majority. It was 4 people already that committed to that number. Just to your point, so when you do a capital reserve infusion, it's usually an appropriation that's separate from the budget. So it wouldn't be part of the budget process. It's a one-time kind of, it's a separate warrant article, really, for that. It's outside of the budget. But I get your point. I get your point. It's well taken. Unless anybody has anything else, we will push forward at $38 million. So that's the number, or forever hold your peace, as of right now, and that's what we'll push forward with, unless anybody else has anything else they want to add to that. We did. It's 4 people said there. 4 people. I was tallying it up here. I had 4 people already. So I think unless we want to haggle, we can. But I mean,
I'd love a show of hands.
okay, we could do that. All right. So this is an informal straw poll. So people who are in favor of moving $38 million back to these guys to come up with the come up with a pared down list at $38 million, or somewhere in that ballpark, raise your hand. All right, so it's 4-3.
I'll just give my opinion on why I didn't raise my hand. I think that, where you're coming from, I think that we may be better off looking at, a number maybe more in the range of 30 million. And then again, some of these projects that are, further out, funding through a capital reserve, over a long term. And I mean, also, you have to remember too, we're going to invest this amount of money, and, the buildings will continue to age. Time will continue to pass. If you install a 20-year roof, in 20 years, you're going to have to put another roof on. So, it's important to remember that, when we're investing money into facilities, this isn't like an end-all, be-all, poof, everything's fixed solution. This is a constant cost that the district will always face.
So I'll echo to Michael's point. I agree with you, Michael. And for what it's worth, I will, whatever this board decides, I will support and work towards that decision as best I can. I have my opinions, but, I'm always going to defer to the majority of the board and help in any way I can.
So, we're not adjourning yet, are we? Okay, so, this is not a consensus. Regardless of which side of the vote I fall on, I don't feel comfortable with this. Again, the last thing I want to hear is it's 4 people making the decision for everyone. So seeing that, you guys are at 30 million, seeing as this is not a meeting, and I hate doing this to the administration, but is there a scenario where we can see something in the ballpark of $30 million as well, and then we continue to have more conversation, because again, this is not a final decision. We're going to have a meeting in 2 weeks. Maybe we come to a final decision there based off of the two more focused scenarios. Because yeah, again, this feeling of being like, okay, it's 4-3 against, that has my thoughts thinking it's going to be harder to get buy-in from everyone on the board, which is the opposite of what you said the goal was today.
But
And I
it's
want to
not a
avoid that as
final
much as.
decision, Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan, and what I would say is, whatever the final decision is, I'm gonna be there and support it and help in any way I can. I just have my opinion, and that's fine. I'm okay with that, and I'm sure Michael's okay with that. I'm sure Brenda's okay with that. I mean, we just have to, I guess we have to have a little trust within ourselves, right, on the board, all 7 of us.
I think we all have the same goal. We all just may have a little bit different of an idea of how to get there. And I think whatever, we end up coming to as a final conclusion here, my hope is that all 7 board members will be on board with that decision. I mean, I know that whatever is decided on, I will be behind it.
So, yes.
Before- I do have one thing I want to mention before I forget, and sorry for digressing here. So, we had originally discussed having a workshop on at the first August meeting. I've talked to Austin, talked to Michael a little bit. We're going to keep it as a regularly scheduled board meeting with a focus on facilities as the primary objective, but because we have a few items that we need to discuss, other agenda items that need to be discussed that are time sensitive. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that nothing really changes except we're a more formalized meeting. And quite frankly, that gives people an opportunity to come to delegations and kind of give feedback at that meeting as well. Just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that.
And we will come up with a figure in the high 20s or whatever that comes out to be, and as well as the 38 for that meeting. Thank you, everyone.
That's greatly appreciated, Austin. And as everyone's mentioned, every time we ask you guys to do something, you always come through and you guys help us make these tough decisions and move forward, district forward. So I appreciate everything you guys do on a daily basis to help with the last 2 years have been what they've been, and it's been greatly appreciated. So thank you. One thing before we adjourn, I wasn't here last meeting, and Austin had made his announcement of retirement, and I just wanted to say thank you for, I think you said 21 years? I was watching it in Aruba while you were giving it, but...
It's been 20, it will be 21.
And, assistant principal for half a year, I think. You were principal for what? I forget what it was, 12, 13 years. I think Hood was rated the best middle school in the state one year, right? 2016 or 15, one of those years. And your time as assistant superintendent, and obviously the 2 years that you've been here. Any working relationship has its ups and downs, but I truly appreciate you. And even before I was on the board, I had a great respect for you and your role as assistant superintendent. When I used to show up to the meetings, I had a lot of respect for the way you kind of told it like it was. And that's kind of how I was very, very impressed by that. And one of the things that, when I first started on the AEF board, I met John Moody for the first time, and this was after I was first elected, and we talked about you, and we had a little conversation. I think he was very proud that you had gotten the superintendent role, and I think if he was here today, he would be proud of where we're heading. And we're not there yet. There's still a lot to go. But I think if he was here today, he would tell you that he was very proud of the work you put in and leading this district. Because you could see, I didn't know him at all, and you could just tell he had a lot of respect for you, and he was very proud. And myself, one thing I will say is, regardless of the last 20 years of this district, I'm proud of where we've come in the last 2 years. It hasn't been easy. It's been a difficult process, but we've been consistent to try to move this district forward the best we can with the situations that we've kind of, were thrust upon, to act on. So from that perspective, I'll always appreciate that, Austin, and what you've given this district, and myself personally working with you over the last 2 years. So thank you very much, and greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate those positive comments, and I will just say change is hard, and I know sometimes this school board has got a little cranky with each other from time to time, but I think that's part of making these difficult decisions. We're going to have differences of opinions because we are changing, we are moving forward, we are making some difficult decisions. If we were just all love and roses and butterflies and all that, then we weren't making difficult decisions. We were just moving along. So I give this board, the last few years of this board, a lot of credit. It's been a hard task, and it continues to be so. And we will continue to have our disagreements from time to time, but we'll work through them, and we'll move forward as a whole group. So thank you all for everything you've done as well.
All right, unless anybody has anything else, well, I guess we're not really officially meeting, right? Meeting's over.
David, do I need
Oh, yes,
to
please.
do
Sorry,
the-
Jane, go ahead.
That's okay.
I almost forgot about you.
Either the August 6th meeting or the August 27th, I'd like to have a public hearing prior to the regular board agenda to bring up the netting for West Running Brook. Which one would the board prefer?
I would do it the first, you asked which I would do it the first meeting of August.
August 6th?
Yeah, if you don't
Okay.
mind, yeah.
Sure, thank you.
No problem. I mean, if anyone else, I mean, I think the
That
sooner
that
the better,
agenda's
right?
light, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. All right. There's no
Thank you.
official adjournment. Thank you, guys.